That heavy, sluggish feeling that descends after a meal, the haze where thoughts slow, focus fades, and memory seems to falter, is more than just a case of being full. Post-meal brain fog is an increasingly common symptom of metabolic distress, a sign that the brain's energy systems are being disrupted. The mind should sharpen after nourishment, not dull. When instead you feel sleepy, forgetful, or irritable after eating, it suggests that the food meant to fuel your brain is actually impairing it. This is not a harmless inconvenience. It is one of the earliest and most revealing warning signs of blood sugar imbalance and emerging insulin resistance in the brain, an invisible condition that, if ignored, can gradually lead to cognitive decline, mood disorders, and metabolic disease. The mechanism behind this fog is deceptively simple, but devastating in its long-term impact. When a meal high in refined carbohydrates or sugars is consumed, blood glucose rises sharply. In response, the pancreas releases insulin to move that glucose into cells for energy. But when this pattern happens repeatedly, especially in those who live sedentary lives or consume processed foods regularly, the cells begin to resist insulin's signal. Glucose then remains in the bloodstream longer than it should, and neurons, which rely on a steady, balanced energy supply, experience a kind of metabolic chaos. Too much sugar at first, then too little as insulin overshoots. The brain is hypersensitive to these fluctuations. Even minor glucose instability can trigger temporary confusion, drowsiness, and lapses in attention. Over years, these cycles erode mitochondrial efficiency and damage the small blood vessels that feed brain tissue. What begins as a mild post-lunch slump can progress toward chronic fatigue, memory impairment, and eventually the neurological form of diabetes, now known as type 3 diabetes. The danger lies in how normalized this fog has become. People accept it as part of modern life, the afternoon crash, the food coma, without realizing it's a biochemical red flag. Each episode of post-meal sluggishness signals that the brain is struggling to manage its fuel supply. Over time, this repeated metabolic strain triggers oxidative stress and inflammation in neural tissue. The hippocampus, responsible for learning and memory, is particularly vulnerable to these glucose swings. Chronic inflammation in this region reduces neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons, and diminishes synaptic plasticity, the foundation of learning. What feels like temporary fuzziness after eating is, in reality, an early rehearsal of long-term cognitive decline. If this pattern continues unchecked, the consequences can become severe. Insulin resistance in the brain doesn't just impair thinking, it alters mood regulation. People prone to post-meal brain fog often experience irritability, anxiety, or sudden fatigue after meals, followed by cravings for more sugar or caffeine to wake up. This vicious cycle traps the brain in dependency on quick energy sources while progressively destroying its ability to regulate them. Eventually, the neuron's insulin receptors become so desensitized that even normal blood sugar levels fail to provide adequate energy, leaving the brain effectively starved despite an abundance of circulating glucose. This energy starvation state contributes to the cognitive decline seen in early Alzheimer's pathology. Scientists now understand that what begins as dietary imbalance can evolve into neurodegeneration decades later if the warning signs are ignored. The damage doesn't stop at the brain. Post-meal hyperglycemia floods the bloodstream with inflammatory cytokines, damaging the endothelium, the lining of blood vessels. This leads to microvascular injury, reduced oxygen delivery to the brain, and further metabolic stress. High insulin levels also promote fat storage and oxidative stress in the liver and pancreas, pushing the entire body toward metabolic syndrome. Over time, what started as a simple inability to stay alert after eating becomes a full systemic breakdown where the brain, liver, and cardiovascular system are locked in a cycle of inflammation and energy mismanagement. The warning signs are subtle but consistent. You may notice you need coffee or sweets shortly after meals. You may find your concentration plummets an hour after eating, or that your mood becomes heavy and unmotivated. You may wake up with decent mental clarity, but fade rapidly after breakfast or lunch. These are not coincidences, they are metabolic messages. Ignoring them means accepting progressive neuronal wear and silent inflammation as your daily baseline. Once neurons lose sensitivity to insulin and their mitochondria begin to malfunction, reversing that damage becomes difficult. By the time memory issues or persistent mental fatigue appear, the brain's metabolic flexibility has already deteriorated significantly. The modern diet is largely to blame. Refined carbohydrates, sweetened beverages, and ultra-processed snacks flood the bloodstream with glucose faster than the brain can use it. Pair this with a sedentary lifestyle, artificial lighting that disrupts circadian rhythms, and chronic sleep deprivation that heightens insulin resistance, and the body's metabolic control collapses. Even those who appear physically fit can experience post-meal brain fog if their diets rely heavily on refined starches, or if their stress levels remain chronically high. Cortisol, the main stress hormone, elevates blood sugar independently, worsening the fluctuations that inflame the brain. To understand the severity of this pattern, it helps to see the long-term trajectory. In the short term, brain fog erodes productivity and emotional balance. In the medium term, it fosters dependence on stimulants like caffeine, which further disrupts sleep and adrenal health. Over years, it contributes to vascular damage, cognitive dullness, and metabolic syndrome. Eventually, it can culminate in insulin-resistant dementia, a condition once considered rare, but now growing alarmingly common. Every post-meal crash is therefore not just a passing dip in energy, but a rehearsal of neurological decline if left unchecked. Prevention and reversal begin with stabilizing blood sugar at its source. Fiber is the most powerful yet underappreciated tool in this process. Fiber-rich foods, such as oats, lentils, beans, and leafy greens, slow glucose absorption and blunt the sharp spikes that trigger fatigue. They provide a steady release of energy that keeps both body and brain balanced for hours. Cinnamon, long studied for its insulin-sensitizing effects, can further help stabilize post-meal glucose levels. Including a teaspoon daily, either in tea or sprinkled on meals, can improve insulin signaling and reduce inflammation. Replacing refined grains with whole grains, avoiding liquid sugars, and prioritizing proteins and healthy fats during meals all help moderate glucose response. Yet nutrition is only half of the solution. Physical movement after eating plays a critical role in regulating blood sugar. Light walking, stretching, or even slow household activity after meals encourages glucose uptake by muscles, reducing the burden on insulin and preventing the subsequent energy crash. This simple habit, a 10 to 15-minute walk after eating, has been shown to lower post-meal glucose peaks dramatically. The effect is not merely physical. It directly preserves neuronal energy stability by keeping blood sugar and insulin in harmony. Sleep and stress management are equally vital. Poor sleep amplifies insulin resistance, while chronic stress keeps cortisol high, both of which sabotage glucose balance. Restoring a consistent sleep routine, limiting late-night eating, and practicing stress-reducing techniques such as deep breathing or mindfulness can prevent the body from remaining in a constant metabolic alarm state. Still, the most critical step is to recognize that post-meal brain fog is not benign. It is a symptom of an overloaded system, a warning that the brain's fuel regulation is failing. Those who dismiss it as a small inconvenience risk allowing silent metabolic damage to advance unchecked for years. By the time clinical symptoms appear, persistent fatigue, forgetfulness, or difficulty focusing, the underlying dysfunction has already taken root. The human brain is resilient, but it cannot endure chronic glycemic turbulence indefinitely. To protect it, meals must become moments of nourishment, not neurological sabotage. Prioritize fiber, healthy fats, and slow-digesting carbohydrates. Avoid processed sugars. Move gently after eating. Treat every episode of post-meal fog not as normal aging or tiredness, but as a message that your neurons are suffocating in unstable chemistry. Ignoring that message is a quiet form of self-destruction. Listening to it and acting on it is an investment in decades of cognitive clarity and emotional stability. The brain depends on balance to stay alive. Every choice you make at the table either restores that balance or erodes it further.